Welcome to Creepy Vibes, y'all. Out here in Texas, the trails got more than dirt and trees. They got secrets. These 20 true stories from Texas hiking trails, they'll mess with your head, and maybe your soul. But before we dive in, most folks make one big mistake. They leave without subscribing. And the ones who do? Well, sometimes they don't come back right. So hit that subscribe button now. Don't risk it, not tonight. Now tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it out there? Drop it in the comments if your hands ain't shaking yet. All right, let's get into it. The dark's already waiting. The morning Dale McCoy drove out to Enchanted Rock, the air smelled like mesquite smoke and something just a touch sweeter. Like burnt sugar, maybe. Or maybe it was just something caught in his truck's old air vents. The smell of a thing long, dead, and never cleaned out. He parked near the ranger station, locked the truck without thinking about it, and started walking toward the trailhead. The parking lot was nearly empty, which suited him just fine. It was Tuesday morning, not the kind of day folks went hiking unless they were tourists or loners. And Dale McCoy had been a loner since Lorna died 3 years ago. He didn't come to Enchanted Rock for exercise, like those college kids with their protein bars and Bluetooth earbuds. He came for quiet, for thinking, for remembering. He had a peanut butter sandwich in his pack, a can of RC Cola, and a photograph of Lorna tucked into his shirt pocket, faded and folded and worn thin where his fingers rubbed it. The hike was harder than it used to be. He was pushing 70 after all. His knees ached going uphill and he had to stop twice to catch his breath. But once he made it past the halfway point, the granite opened up like a mirror to the sky. The heat shimmered above the rock in translucent waves, and everything felt still, like time hit the pause button just for him. That's when he saw her. She was maybe 30 feet away, small, 8, maybe 9 years old. Long black hair tangled, up like she'd been dragged through a thorn bush. Dirty, bare feet, torn white dress, stained brown at the hem. She wasn't crying, wasn't scared, just standing real still, like she was trying to be a part of the rock, like she belonged to it. Dale thought maybe she was lost. It wasn't unheard of. He reached into his pocket for his phone, then raised his hand slowly like he would if he was trying to calm a horse. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently. "You okay?" No answer, no movement. She didn't blink, didn't even squint. Her eyes were wide and shining, but they weren't full of tears. They were full of nothing, like looking into a dry well and expecting to see stars at the bottom. He stepped closer, just one step, and she smiled. It was a small thing, a little twitch of her lips, but it hit him in the chest like a sucker punch. Because it wasn't a child's smile, it was a grown-up's smile. Tired, knowing, hungry. She opened her mouth like she was going to speak, but what came out wasn't words. It was a hum, just a soft little tune, off-key, slow, like a record playing backwards. Dale felt something turn over inside him, something cold and rubbery. He backed up, tripped. His boots scraped the granite and his sandwich crushed flat in his pack as he landed hard on his ass. He looked up, and she was gone. He scrambled to his feet, heart thumping. Looked around, hand on the knife in his belt. Not that it would have done any damn good. The place where she'd stood was empty, but the footprints were still there. Bare, small, fresh, sunk deep into the thin dust on the granite as if she'd stood there for hours. They radiated heat, like she'd burned herself into the rock. Dale didn't finish his hike that day. He didn't even eat his sandwich. He walked back to his truck in silence, every step slower than the last, like the land didn't want him leaving. He glanced over his shoulder more than once, and each time he thought he saw something at the edge of the trail. A shadow behind a boulder, a flicker of movement near the brush, a hint of a dress fluttering in the heat shimmer. He drove straight, home. He didn't tell anyone about it, not for a few days. Not until Friday night at the Firehouse Tavern, after 2 Lone Stars and a shot of wild turkey. He told the story low, under his breath, while the jukebox played a Merle Haggard song no one was listening to. "You're full of it," said Mitch Taylor, a hunting buddy from way back. "Girl on the Trail sounds like heat stroke." But the woman sitting at the end of the bar, nobody even remembered her coming in, lifted her head and said, "She don't blink no more." Silence. She looked right at Dale, and there was something wrong in her eyes. Not bloodshot or tired, just wrong. Saw her once, year before last. My nephew did too. He tried to talk to her, thought she was lost. Now he sits in the bathtub all day, talking to the drain. The bar fell quiet after that. Nobody asked any more questions. Dale left early. That night, he dreamed of granite. Not the smooth kind, split rock, and a hum echoing out of the cracks. He didn't go back to Enchanted Rock. Not that week, not ever, but others did. And they saw her. More hikers started reporting a barefoot girl near the summit. Sometimes she was smiling, sometimes she was humming, but never blinking. A couple went missing in 2011. Last photo on their camera was of the summit. And in the corner, near the rocks, a blurred shape. White dress, dark hair, no face. People called her No Blink Annie. Some joked about it on Reddit. Some posted photos. But the locals, they stopped laughing after a boy came home from a Boy Scout hike with his eyes open so wide his mother couldn't get them to shut. He didn't speak again. Doctors said he'd scratched his own. Tear ducts raw. When they asked what happened, he wrote one sentence over and over, "She don't blink no more." Dale McCoy lives in a trailer now, far up near Amarillo where there ain't no granite. He don't walk trails anymore. Don't hike. Don't trust shadows. He keeps the photo of Lorna by his bedside, and beside it, a bottle of eye drops. Just in case. Because some nights, when the wind's just right and the stars go real quiet, he hears a hum outside, and sometimes he can feel her staring. There are parts of Texas where the land folds in strange ways. Jagged limestone hills that look like vertebrae rising from the dirt, wind-carved bluffs that echo when no one's speaking, and twisted live oaks that claw at the sky like they're begging for something. The Devil's Backbone, they call it. A rugged ridge running through the hill country near Wimberley, a place known for winding roads, ghost stories, and the kind of silence that presses on your chest like a preacher's hand. People don't live long out that way. They settle for a few years, then pack up and leave, talking about bad dreams and strange noises and just not feeling right. They don't say the name aloud, not once they've heard it, but you hear whispers at the gas stations and bars. Locals talk low, drink fast, and tell each other not to go out after dark. Not there, not near the backbone. It was fall when Ben Carver decided to take his daughter camping. He was a single dad, former Marine turned carpenter, a practical man, who thought the woods were the last real place a kid could learn anything worth knowing. His daughter, Molly, was 12, small for her age but whip-smart, always reading, always asking questions that made adults blink and scramble for answers. Ben figured a weekend under the stars would be good for her. No phone, no screen, just firelight and the kind of quiet that makes you notice the sound of your own breath. They pulled into a primitive campsite just north of the ridge. No rangers, no hookups, no cell signal. Just a rusted fire ring, a picnic table that looked older than sin, and woods that pressed in too close. "I don't like it here," Molly said, climbing out of the truck. "Feels like something's watching." Ben laughed. "That's just the deer. They smell our beef jerky." But that night, as the fire burned down and the trees started to groan in the wind, Ben heard it too. Not watching, not exactly, but listening. The kind of silence that has ears. Around midnight, Molly sat bolt upright in her sleeping bag. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you hear that?" Ben held still. At first, nothing. Then, a whistle. soft, far away, high and reedy like someone trying to play a tune through broken teeth. He unzipped the tent flap and stepped out. The stars were scattered and sharp. The wind had died, but the trees still moved, as if stirred by something else. The whistle came again, closer now. 3 slow notes. Up, down, up, then silence. Ben scanned the tree line, but there was nothing. No crunch of footsteps, no rustle of brush. Just that sound, that damn whistle. Molly was behind him now, clutching his arm. "It's not a person," she said. "It doesn't breathe right." He turned to tell her to get back in the tent, but her eyes, wide, glassy, locked on the woods, made the words freeze in his throat. They didn't sleep. Just before dawn, Ben heard the whistle again. This time, it was right behind the tent. He grabbed the flashlight, unzipped the flap in one motion, and burst out, light swinging. Nothing. But the ground was disturbed, like something had circled them. No footprints, just long, shallow scrapes, as if fingers had dragged through the dirt. They packed up and left before the sun was fully up. That might have been the end of it, if not for what came next. The next day, back at home in San Antonio, Molly wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. She just sat in her room, staring at the corner like something was still there. Ben tried everything. Called the doctor, the pastor, even took her to a child psychologist who told him Molly was dealing with a trauma response and needed time. But Ben had seen trauma. He knew what it looked like. This wasn't it. This was fear. Real, deep, bone-level fear. 2 nights later, he woke to the sound of whistling inside the house. He stormed out of the bedroom with a bat in hand, but no one was there. Just the smell of cedar and something else, something wet. Molly was gone. Her window was open, no broken glass, no forced screen, just open, like she'd gone willingly. The police searched. The neighbors searched. The dogs couldn't get a scent. The trail ended at the edge of their backyard, with the same shallow drag marks in the grass. Ben didn't stop looking. He went back to the Backbone every weekend, camped in the same place, left out her stuffed rabbit and an old Walkman she used to carry, sat in silence, waiting for the whistle. He heard it every single night, sometimes near, sometimes far, always just beyond the trees. He started recording it. Dozens of tapes, hundreds of hours, most of them filled with wind and insects and the quiet hush of an empty forest. But on 3 tapes you can hear it, faint, almost like static, that awful, broken whistle. On 1 tape, you hear a voice, too. Not Ben, not Molly. A child's voice, distant and soft. "I don't want to whistle anymore." The tape ends with 3 notes, up, down, up. They say he still camps there. Locals spot him off FM 32, walking the edge of the trees with a recorder in one hand and a picture of Molly in the other. He doesn't talk much anymore. Doesn't work, doesn't sleep, just listens. The whistler doesn't show himself. Doesn't have to. He waits. And if you stop out there, on that winding ridge where the road curves too tight in the shadows, move wrong. Roll your windows up. Lock the doors. Don't look too long at the brush. And if you hear it, those 3 notes, rising and falling like breath through a slit throat, do not answer, because the whistler's looking for a voice to borrow, a mouth to use, a new soul to drag down into whatever place he calls home. And once you hear him, he remembers you. Forever. Jonah Parkins wasn't supposed to come back. Everyone told him so. His mother, his therapist, the guy at the bait shop who refused to make eye contact when Jonah bought that oversized map of the Big Thicket. Even his own gut told him it was a mistake. But when you lose your brother in a place like that, when you feel the pull of a last message sent in the dead of night, one line scratched into digital eternity like a scream echoing out of a bottomless cave, then the rules don't matter anymore. He's watching me. The deer, there's no eyes. That's what Wade had texted, and then nothing. No more pings, no calls, no footprints, no broken branches. Just the sound of cicadas rising like a choir warming up for something ugly. The park rangers combed the trails, helicopters, dogs, volunteers. Wade had been camping alone, writing one of those freelance nature pieces for some eco magazine that probably never even ran his first draft. He liked the quiet, the stillness. Said it reminded him of growing up in the woods behind their grandfather's farm. But Big Thicket was something else. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't still. It was listening. Jonah arrived 1 year to the day. Same time, same month. Same stretch of overgrown trail that slithered deeper than any map ever showed. He parked the Escape on the gravel shoulder just past FM 943, near a sun-bleached sign half swallowed by vines. It had once read, Big Thicket National Preserve. Preserve the past. But all that remained now were rusted letters and the vague impression of something trying to disappear. He hadn't told anyone, not even his girlfriend who'd stopped asking about Wade sometime around Christmas. Jonah shouldered his pack, glanced once at the sky, thick clouds rolling in low and slow like someone pouring cement over the world, and stepped into the trees. The thicket doesn't welcome you, it tolerates you. The pines lean too far inward, like they're whispering about you behind your back. The undergrowth seems to reach just a bit too far. And then there's the smell. It's not rot exactly. It's older than that. It's the smell of soil that's remembered things that ought to stay buried. Jonah walked for hours, following Wade's hand-drawn map. It was crude. Just lines and crude sketches and weird little notations like, don't whistle here, or, if you hear clicking, stop. He thought Wade had gone a little crazy toward the end. Thought maybe it was heat stroke, or bad mushrooms, or some weird viral swamp bug that made you paranoid and hallucinate deer that didn't have eyes. But then he found the clearing, just like in the drawing. A circle of trees. Not dead, exactly, but still. Their branches didn't sway. Their needles didn't fall. They just stood there, stiff and black as if fire had brushed past without bothering to burn. At the center stood a buck. It didn't move. It didn't twitch. It just stood there, tall and lean and horrible. Its antlers stretched wide, branching out in jagged spirals like shattered ribs. Its skin, not fur, not really, hung in wet tatters. Patches of black, greasy hide stretched thin over unnatural bone. And its face. 2 perfect holes. No eyes, no lids, no blood, just holes. As if something had scooped them out and forgot to be gentle. Jonah froze. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't swallow. Couldn't even cry. Because the deer was looking at him, or through him. And something shifted in the air. Like a change in pressure, like standing too close to a speaker just before it explodes into static. The deer moved, not like an animal. More, like a man in a broken mask, limbs jerking wrong, neck craning with too many angles. It took a step, and another. Jonah backed away. Branches slapped his arms. Thorns tore at his jacket. His boots sank into moss that felt too warm, too soft. He ran until his lungs begged for mercy, and then he tripped. Into a creek, the water was black and thick like oil. The moment he hit it, the world shifted. Time bent. He was in his room, 12 years old. Wade was there, smiling that crooked smile, holding a flashlight under his chin, telling ghost stories. Then the flashlight flickered, and Wade's eyes. Gone. 2 holes, and the deer was behind him, whispering, in a voice made of mud and teeth, "You're his now." Jonah screamed. He was back in the forest, lying in the mud. The deer stood over him. Its breath, if it had any, smelled like wet ashes. It lowered its head, antlers so close he could see the bark growing along them like twisted veins, and then it stepped inside him. Not physically, but deeper, like a nail driven into the soul. He felt it, nesting, watching, breathing through him. When Jonah stumbled out of the woods 3 days later, his eyes were gone. No blood, just 2 perfect holes, and yet he smiled. They found him near the ranger's station, muddy, silent, blind. He wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat, just sat there, breathing like someone had borrowed his body and hadn't finished learning how to use it. Eventually, they took him to a facility. He carved a deer over and over again into the walls, and in the corner of his cell, just before lights. Out each night, the guards swore they saw antlers growing. They say there's a new buck in the Big Thicket now, bigger than the rest, doesn't blink, doesn't run, and its eyes, well, it doesn't have any, but it sees you just the same. And if you look too long, if you really see it, then it follows you home. Because what it wants isn't just your body. It wants a window, and your eyes make a perfect pair. They say the lost maples ain't rightly named after the trees. No, sir. They're named after the ones who went in and never came back. Every year, sometime round the end of October, the kind of quiet settles over the Vanderpool Hills that makes a man feel like he's trespassing just by breathing. The park goes gold and red, and all those leaf watchers come driving in from San Antonio and Houston, wearing Patagonia vests and taking pictures of their kids smiling under arching branches. But the locals, the ones born here and still stuck here, we know to stay away once the air changes. Not just cooler, heavier. Like the trees are leaning in, holding their breath. You can call it superstition. Lotta people do. But you ask around enough at the Lost Maples Cafe off Ranch Road 337, the old-timers with hands like cedar bark and eyes like storm clouds, and you'll start hearing stories. Like the one about little Josie Lang, 8 years old, went missing back in 1973. Her folks were just setting up camp when she wandered off chasing a butterfly. They found her 5 hours later, curled up under a maple tree with her fingernails all torn off. Said she was trying to dig through the bark. Said she could hear someone crying inside. She never spoke again, or the campers in '86. College. Kids, 4 of them. Brought mushrooms, whiskey, and one hell of a Bluetooth speaker. Figured they'd get high and howl at the moon. Only 2 came back, one with bite marks on his forearm that weren't human. The other kept carving little trees into his legs with a penknife for months after. Died in a psych ward. Drowned himself in the mop bucket. But you want to know the worst one? The one that ain't no ghost tale, no folklore, no redneck mythology? That'd be mine. I was 17 the first time I heard the trees scream. I ain't proud of it, but back then, me and a couple of good-for-nothing friends used to sneak into the park late at night, bring a couple of beers, talk about girls, and piss on the signs that said, "Do not enter after dark." We thought it was a joke. Park rangers just trying to keep the kids out. Hell, I'd even heard one say the screamin' was just wind rollin' through the hollows. But wind don't sound like that. It was October 28th, 1992. Cold snap had hit early. I remember the way the mist hung in the low branches like it was waitin'. Me, Tanner Boyd, and Lyle Ferguson had just passed the east trailhead, flashlights low, laughing about some dumb girl who ghosted Tanner after prom. Then we heard it. First, we thought it was a coyote, but the pitch rose too fast, too sharp. Then it cracked, like a throat that had been screaming too long, then split in 2. It didn't echo like it should have in the canyon. It just hung in the air, thick and close, like it was coming from right behind your ear. We stopped laughing. We stopped breathing. We turned. The trees looked different. I know that don't sound scary, but they did. Maples all leaning the wrong way. Branches twistin'. Bark that. Looked slick. almost wet. Leaves weren't red anymore. Not fall red, blood red. Fresh. And then we saw Lyle start walking. Slow. Like he was sleeping. He stepped off the path, didn't even blink. Just went toward the tallest tree in the grove, one with a knot in the trunk like a half-open mouth. Me and Tanner yelled for him, but he didn't stop. We chased him. Lost him. Tanner grabbed my arm and whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded. I wish I hadn't. It was Lyle's voice. Only it wasn't. It was deeper, stretched out like it was being pulled from underwater. "Help. Help me. I'm in the bark." That's when Tanner screamed. I turned and saw the tree behind him, moving. I don't mean swaying. I mean twisting, groaning, like it had bones inside it, like it was reaching. We ran. We didn't stop till we hit the road, didn't talk till the next morning. We didn't call the cops. Wouldn't have helped. They never find the bodies, only things that were left behind. A shoe, a phone, a bloody hoodie hanging on a branch like a flag. Tanner stopped talking to me, said I brought it on us, said the trees knew my name now. 2 years later, he drove his truck into the canyon wall just outside Leakey. No skid marks, just impact. They say he had leaf fragments in his mouth. Maple. I never went back, but I hear him every year. I live 6 miles from the preserve, and every October, round the 28th, I sleep with the TV on, every light burning. Doesn't help. The screams come anyway. Not from the park, from the trees around my house. They lean closer each year. My neighbor, Miss Lucille, she swears the bark on her pecan trees started to split open, like lips pulling back from teeth. My dog won't go near the oak in the backyard anymore. Just whines and stares, and the air, it tastes like copper. I don't know what's in those trees. I don't know if it's spirits or echoes or something older than anything we've got words for. But I know this. They feed off sound, off pain, off memory. Every person they take, they keep, and they don't just scream to scare you. They scream because they want out. They scream because they're still in there. So, if you ever find yourself wandering the Lost Maples come late October, and you hear what sounds like a woman crying, or a man begging, or a child calling your name, don't follow it, don't look up, and don't stop walking no matter what you hear behind you, because once they know your name, the screaming trees never forget. The Guadalupe Mountains don't like to be found. Not really. They'll let you hike their winding ridgelines, breathe their dry sky, maybe even camp beneath their wide-bellied moon. But they don't care for visitors who overstay. They certainly don't like being forgotten places remembered again. Travis Durand wasn't new to that trail. He'd made his bones as a backcountry ranger up near the Bitterroots and Guadalupe Peak. That was a cakewalk. He'd driven in from New Mexico early, left the rental car locked behind a dry stand of Ocotillo, and hiked 3 miles in past the last marked post. That night he planned to sleep off-grid, off-map, off-world. That was how he liked it. He was 42, recently divorced, and still carried the smell of papers and courtroom ink on his clothes. He wasn't escaping. That's what he told himself. He was just resetting. The sun dipped down behind El Capitan, and Travis, working by headlamp and instinct, had set his tent in a depression behind a windbreak of rock and cypress. No one around. No light. Just the stars. Those deep Texas stars, like a black lake poked full of holes. And the silence, which at that elevation wasn't silence at all. It breathed, whispered. Every now and then, something out there moved. Deer, he told himself. Jackrabbit, maybe. When he smelled the fire, it was soft, unassuming, like someone lighting pine cones on a porch. He caught it when the wind shifted west, lifting that whisper of heat and burning cedar to his nose, and something inside him, something old and animal, stirred. Someone else was out here. But that didn't make sense. He'd seen no other. Cars at the base, no camps staked along the trail. This part of the mountain was unmarked. Not illegal, just forgotten. The kind of place people used to go before GPS started pinning every secret spot like butterflies on corkboard. The firelight glowed maybe 200 yards out, faint but real. He turned off his headlamp and let his eyes adjust. There it was, a little pulse of orange in the dark, like a slow heartbeat. He stood still for a while, one boot sunk into gravel, the other on dry scrub. He didn't call out. He didn't want to. There was something about the way the fire flickered, not wild, not even crackling, just steady, unnatural, like it wasn't wood burning, but the very air. He moved closer. The grove appeared like it had always been there, but it hadn't. He'd scouted this whole slope earlier. He would have seen it. He should have seen it. The fire burned in the center of a perfect ring of 12 stones. Not regular stones. Black, egg-shaped, smooth like river rocks but dry, as bone. They reflected the light oddly, no shimmer, just a dead gleam like candle wax. There were 3 logs arranged around the fire for sitting. One was cracked down the middle. Another had the initials JS carved in with a lazy knife. The Eweb third was soaked dark in the middle. Old blood or oil he couldn't tell. No backpacks. No lanterns. No voices. But there was warmth. A lot of warmth. The kind that doesn't make sense with a fire so small. And the shadows didn't match the fire. Travis blinked, heart skipping. The firelight should have thrown long. Shadows back, away from him. But the 3 dark shapes didn't move right. They bent the wrong way. Twitched, like they weren't attached to anything at all. One flicked toward him, fast, like it had noticed. And that's when the wind dropped. Just gone. One moment it stirred the trees. The next it was like the mountain had stopped breathing. Travis turned around to leave, maybe go back to camp, maybe hike until sunrise. He didn't know. But the trail behind him? It was gone. The whole damn ridgeline had changed. Trees leaned different. The sky was inkier. Stars blinked out. No sound. Just the dull pop and hiss of that steady flame behind him. Then someone whispered. He spun around fast, light-headed. The fire crackled louder, then fell quiet again. The whisper came again. Closer. He backed up, felt something soft crunch underfoot, looked down. Marshmallows. Melted. Dozens of them, scattered in the brush like someone had dropped them one by one. Some were half-bitten, others cracked and dried like they'd been there years. He backed up more, turned fast, and the 3 seats were full. They hadn't been seconds ago. But now someone sat on each log, perfectly still, watching the fire. Faces turned just slightly away. One was a tall man with a ranger's hat pulled low. His face was bloated. Skin pale and peeling. Hands folded like he was waiting on a sermon. Another was a woman, red-haired and barefoot, legs crossed. Her eyes were wide open, too wide, not blinking. The third was smaller. A boy, maybe 10, hair matted, face blank, just sitting, and humming. A long, low note that felt like it came from inside Travis's skull. He stumbled back, fell on one knee. The boy stopped humming, slowly turned his head. "You're late," he said, voice soft. "It's your turn." Travis stood, breath short. "No," he whispered. I didn't start this fire." The boy tilted his head, smiled. His teeth were black and wet. "No," the woman said, her voice like rustling paper. "But you warmed your hands by it." Travis looked down. His palms glowed. A soft orange light radiated from his skin. "You invited it," the man said. "You smelled it. You followed it. You saw the stones, and you stayed. I didn't know. Doesn't matter." Travis turned to run, tripped over the marshmallows. Again. staggered past the trees, pushing through branches that hadn't been there a minute ago. Thorns grabbed at his coat. Sap bled like veins. He didn't stop running until the fire was gone, until the glow faded behind him. When he finally found his camp again, it was ruined. His tent slashed, his bag gone. The earth dug up around the edges like something had clawed at it from underneath, and someone had rearranged his campfire stones. 12 of them now. Black, smooth, egg-shaped. The logs were set in a triangle. One cracked, one carved, one soaked, and in the center a matchbook from a diner called Lucille's. One he'd passed on the highway but never stopped at. Burned down 15 years ago. He picked it up. One match was used. The rest were damp. On the inside flap, someone had scrawled in charcoal, "Not your fire, not your night, but your seats still warm." Travis left that morning. Didn't sleep, didn't eat, hiked fast, got out by noon, drove straight to El Paso. Flew home the next day. He didn't tell anyone why, but sometimes when the wind dies suddenly, he smells it again. Burning sugar, melted marshmallow, a campfire in the dark. That isn't his, and never was. They say Caddo Lake is older than time, carved by floods and whispered into being by something more ancient than man. There's a hush that hangs over its waters, like the trees themselves are holding their breath. Spanish moss drips from cypress, limbs like old lace, and the frogs and birds go silent just a few minutes too long sometimes, long enough to feel like the world's listening to something you can't hear. The first time Reba May heard about the mud baby, she laughed. Reba was born stubborn and stayed that way. Raised on black coffee and blacker humor with enough bad luck behind her to spit at superstitions. She was the kind of woman who poured bourbon into her sweet tea and dared ghosts to try her. When she moved into her uncle's old fishing shack near Caddo Lake, folks warned her, not in loud voices, but in quiet ones, over folded arms and careful glances. "Don't stay out past dusk," the old man at the tackle shop said, shaking, his head slow. "And if you hear it crying, you best not go looking." Reba had shrugged him off. Crying? Out in the woods? She'd heard worse, but that first night, she didn't sleep much. The shack creaked like it had a soul. Boards swelled and groaned. Wind carried voices through the trees, soft like lullabies sung through wet cloth. And sometime round 3 a.m., she heard it. It wasn't animal. That was the first thing she noticed. No yips or screeches. This was a cry. A baby's cry. But not just that. It was wet, choked, gurgling, like lungs full of lake water. It twisted something deep in her gut, that sound. Not just because it was unnatural, but because it was sad. Ancient and hollow, like grief itself had learned how to wail. Reba didn't go to the window. She told herself she was tired hearing things. That it was just an owl, maybe a raccoon, hell, maybe a recording someone left behind just to spook city folk like her. She poured another drink and turned up the old radio. The next morning, she found muddy handprints on the porch rail. Small ones, like a toddler's, only not shaped quite right. The fingers were too long, too thin. One of them dragged across the wood like it was reaching. Still, she stayed. Maybe because she didn't believe, or maybe because part of her didn't care. You lose enough people in your life, the things that should scare you just don't anymore. Reba had no husband, no kids, just an old dog named Turtle, who'd stopped going near the lake the moment they arrived. A week in, she saw it. She was out by the dock, barefoot and hungover, skipping stones and cursing the heat. The water was low that day, dark and still as tar. Turtle had his back turned, fur standing up in a ridge down his spine. Reba turned, followed his gaze, and there it was. At first, she thought it was a stump, but then it moved, It stood about 3 feet high, slumped over like it was too heavy for its own shape. Its body was made of mud and reeds, packed tight, dripping slowly. No face, no real features, just the suggestion of a head, shoulders, arms. But the eyes, they were the worst part. Not even real eyes, but hollow pits where they should have been, so black they made her stomach turn. It lifted its arms. Reba backed up, slow. "Nope," she muttered. "Nope, nope, hell no." The thing didn't follow. It just stood there, arms up, swaying like it was rocking itself to sleep. She didn't sleep that night. A few days later, the crying came back. Closer this time. It circled the shack, always just out of sight. Turtle whimpered until he hid under the bed. And the next morning, the handprints were inside the porch, on the doorframe. One of them left behind a smear of water and black soil that smelled like death. Reba did some digging, asked around, offered cigarettes and hush money to get the stories from the locals. Turns out the mud baby was older than the lake's maps. Some said it was born from a drowned child, a girl lost back in 1913 when the Red River flooded and swallowed whole families. Others said it was many children, all the forgotten ones. Babies born still and tossed into the lake by mothers too poor or too scared. Things buried in secret and mourned in silence. It don't matter where it came from. It's what it wants that's worse. It wants a mother, and it don't care if she's already buried her own children. Don't care if she's got gray in her hair or scars on her belly. If you've ever held a baby, ever wanted one, ever lost one, the mud baby knows. It smells that ache like a dog smells fear, and once it finds you, it won't stop. Reba tried to leave. She packed up the truck at dawn, threw Turtle in the passenger seat, and sped down the gravel road like the devil was on her heels. But the woods weren't right. Roads twisted. Paths she knew like the back of her hand didn't lead where they should. The lake showed up where it had no business being, just beyond the trees, always closer. She drove in circles for hours. When the truck ran out of gas, she sat there and wept. Turtle whined low, staring out the windshield. And then the crying started again. This time it was right beside her door. She looked. It stood there, a puddle forming beneath its feet, arms stretched up like a child wanting to be held. Its face was shifting, like mud trying to remember what a human looked like. For just a second, Reba saw her own reflection in its sockets. It whispered something then, a single wet word. "Mama," she screamed. That was 2 years ago. No one's seen Reba May since. Her shack's still empty, save for Turtle, who was found days later walking the road alone, too scared to bark, eyes wild and glazed. Folks tried to sell the property, but buyers don't stick. Something about the way the wood always feels, damp, or the way lullabies echo from the lake at night when there's no wind. But every now and then, someone hears the crying. A tourist, a camper, a hiker just passing through. They always say the same thing. It sounds real. Too real, and if they turn to look, well, there's always room in the mud for one more. So if you ever find yourself in the piney woods near Caddo Lake, and the air gets too still and the trees too quiet, don't follow the sound. Don't answer the cry. And for the love of God, don't say, "I'm here," because it's listening, and it's still looking for its mama. They said it was just fire. A bad one, sure. The kind that tears through pines like God himself spilled gasoline and dropped a match. September 2011, they'd said. Over 30,000 acres, more than 1,600 homes. Trees black as bones, sky red as war. But in the end, it burned out. Like they all do, at least that's what they told people. What they didn't say was what stayed behind. Eddie Burnell wasn't new to trails. The guy had hiked Big Bend in July with nothing but a half-gallon of water and beef jerky. Bastrop, though? Bastrop was different. It smelled different, even 10 years after the blaze. Not smoke, not char. Something else. He came in from Austin that morning, a gray Saturday when the clouds hung so low you could almost reach up and smear them across your shirt. He was tired of the city, tired of his tiny apartment and the endless scream of deadlines and Spotify ads. A few days in the woods, he thought, would settle him down. He didn't bring anyone, not even his brother Clay, who usually tagged along. Eddie told himself it was because he wanted peace. Truth was, Clay had stopped talking to him. After what happened at the lake house in August, the thing with the mirror and the dog and the knocking in the walls, Clay didn't answer calls anymore. So Eddie hiked alone. From the moment he parked his truck at the scenic Overlook Trail, he knew something was wrong. The trees were alive. Not in the way all forests are alive, but in the way something sick still twitches after you think it's gone. He walked for hours that first day, took pictures, ate sunflower seeds. But around 4 p.m., just as the sun started bleeding through the scorched trunks, he noticed the breathing. It wasn't his own. The forest inhaled. Long, low, loud. Like something the size of a city block was asleep just below the topsoil. Like lungs the size of buildings, slowly filling with damp, angry air. You felt it through your shoes, your knees, your teeth. Eddie stood still for 5 whole minutes. It wasn't wind. The wind moves things. This just rose, and then it fell. When he looked down at his boots, they were full of ash. Not on them, in them. Packed into the laces, into the toe. Warm to the touch like it had just come off a burning log. His socks were black. He hadn't stepped in anything like that. The trail had been clean. Dry leaves, some gravel, maybe a few patches of gray dust. But this was fresh. He kicked the ash out, muttering to himself. That's when he saw them. Prints next to his own. They were long, not wide enough to be a bear, not narrow enough to be a coyote. Almost like a barefoot man had been walking beside him, but the toes were wrong. Splayed, webbed maybe. 4 of them. No heel. Eddie told himself they'd been there the whole time, that maybe he hadn't noticed. But even as he said it, he knew better. He'd walked this whole trail. These prints were new, and they followed. Every time he stopped, they did too. Every time he turned, they vanished. But when he walked again, there they were, matching pace. Left, right, left, breathing. With him, by sundown, Eddie was lost. The trail had changed. No markers, no signage. Even his GPS refused to cooperate. No bars, just a spinning circle. That night he made a fire. Not for warmth, it was hot as sin even after dark. No, he built it for light, because when the sun went down, the forest started twitching. Trees swayed without wind. Grass bent under invisible feet. And once, just once, Eddie heard a voice. Not a whisper, not speech, a breath, one word. Stay. He ran, barefoot, left everything, tent, bag, even his phone. He followed the moon, or what he thought was the moon, and just kept moving. When he finally reached the gravel road, he collapsed by his truck. Boom. Prints were there again. In the ash across his windshield, the forest had breathed him out. For now, that was 3 years ago. Eddie lives in a one-room trailer outside Blanco now. Doesn't talk much. Doesn't sleep much either. But he paints. That's the strange part. He paints trees, charred, twisted, with things hiding behind them. Long limbs, too many fingers and lungs. Always lungs. Sometimes he paints faces, too. Pale ones, half-formed like they were born in smoke and never quite figured out how to be real. He tried to burn the paintings once, but they didn't catch fire. He doesn't go near Bastrop anymore. But sometimes when the night gets too quiet, when the air gets heavy and the crickets stop chirping, he feels it again. The breathing. Slow, deep, familiar, and then he checks his boots and finds the ash. Somewhere west of Odessa, out past the pump jacks and the bleached cattle skulls, the land starts to hum with silence. It's the kind of silence that don't sit easy, the kind that feels watched. That's Monaghan Sandhills, a desert masquerading as a park, with dunes that roll like waves and heat that don't quit, not even in the middle of the night. They say the wind there tells stories if you're quiet enough, old ones, dangerous ones. But the one story folks keep lowering their voices to tell, especially after the sun's dipped and the land's glowing red like a wound, is about her. The melting woman. No name. No origin that's certain. Just heat and grief and something sticky behind the eyes. I first heard about her from a man named Callum Brewer, retired oil rig worker, had a cough like gravel and fingers stained yellow from tobacco. We'd both been drinking at a rundown bar off I-20. You know the type. Neon cross above the jukebox. Flies swimming in the ketchup bottles. He leaned over his whiskey and told me, "You ever go out to them dunes? Just before dusk? Don't. Not alone. That sand holds on to more than sunlight. There's something out there. Something that sticks to you." I laughed. Of course I did. But that laugh faded when he showed me his arm. The flesh around his forearm looked warped, like old wax molded wrong and half melted back into shape. Hairless, pocked, a sheen that caught the light unnatural. She touched me. Just once. Never been right since. He wouldn't say more. Just paid his tab and walked out into the night, sleeves tugged back down like he'd already said too much. Now, I've written about strange things. Places that breathe, houses that bleed, people who vanish into cornfields. But this stuck with me. So a week later, I drove out there, mid-July, heat advisories screaming on the radio, sand temperatures that could fry an egg and your sanity at the same time. The park looked harmless at first, families laughing, tourists climbing dunes, little girls rolling down slopes like sugar cookies in powdered dust. But the wind carried something beneath the laughter, something heavy, almost wet. I waited until sunset. The crowds thinned out. Lights in the lot flickered on. The rangers, at least the smart ones, packed up. One of them, young fella, with a jaw like a shovel, caught me hanging back. "Don't go out there after dark, sir," he said. "Why not?" "You won't come back the same." Then he got in his truck and drove off without looking back. So I walked. The dunes rose like ghost hills, golden at first, then bruised purple as the sun dipped low. The heat didn't fade. It changed, grew closer, personal, like a breath, on the back of my neck that didn't belong to me. That's when I heard it, a sound like wax dripping, like tears hitting a stovetop, and then the smell. Not just sweat or heat or dry brush. No, this was different. Sweet, almost, like melted crayons and burning hair. I saw her at the top of a dune. She was bent, not hunched, drooped. Her face sagged like candle wax on a windowsill, cheeks pulled low, eyes swollen and sunken. Her arms stretched longer than they should, as if gravity had been arguing with her skeleton for too long and was finally winning. She didn't walk. She slithered. Her feet left behind streaks, not footprints but melts, like she was dissolving with every step. She didn't speak, didn't groan or howl. She just wept. Thick, syrupy tears that dropped and sizzled into the sand. I wanted to move. I couldn't. Not out of fear, but out of heat. My boots felt glued. My breath stuck in my throat. I swear the air around her shimmered like the surface of a frying pan. And then she reached. Slow, stretching. Fingers like softened. Candle wicks. I stumbled backward. Fell. Sand in my mouth, my ears, my boots. She kept coming. Not fast, but relentless, like a spill. And then she touched me. Only for a second. Just my shin. Felt like a kiss from a stovetop. My jeans fused to my skin. I screamed, scrambled, kicked, crawled, left half my calf's worth of skin behind in the sand. Didn't stop running till I reached my car. Didn't stop driving till I crossed county lines. The burn mark stayed for months. Doctors couldn't explain it. Said it looked like chemical exposure. I never told them about her. Wouldn't believe it anyhow. But sometimes, when the sun's too bright, I feel it again. That tugging, that stickiness. And every now and then, I see something on my rearview mirror, a smear, a drip, and I hear her weeping in the AC hum. They say the desert forgets, that it erases footprints, that wind smooths out tragedy, but Monaghan's remembers, and she's still there, still melting, still reaching, and if she touches you, even once, you'll never be the same. The river didn't used to scare me. Pedernales Falls was the kind of place you took someone when you wanted to feel small in the right kind of way. The wide, flat rocks spread out like giant bones bleached in the sun, the current whispering as it slid smooth between crevices, always moving, always whispering. We used to say the river talked to itself. Hell, maybe it did, but one summer, the river started saying a boy's name. Not that anyone knew it for sure. I was 17 when I saw him. Not the first two, but I reckon the first to talk about. It and not end up gone. It was the summer after Mom left and Dad was off work more than usual, laid off from the feed plant and drinking most days by 3. I spent most of that summer out at Pedernales with my friends, or alone when they got tired of me. The park ranger used to warn us to stay on the trails, but everyone in Blanco County knew that the real stories, the kind that made your skin crawl in the heat, happened just off the trail, deep in the cedar breaks and limestone caves. They'd been talking about the boy with the rope since before I could spell suicide. First time I heard about him was around a fire near Twin Falls. Jacob Redding swore up and down he saw him when he was 12. A little boy, maybe 9 or 10, wearing cut-off shorts and a shirt that looked like it had been through a paper shredder. He was holding a black rope in one hand, looking down from a ledge. I thought he was playing, Jacob said, and the fire crackled like it agreed. But then I looked up again, and he was swinging, just hanging there, looking at me with his head turned all the way around. Not just his neck twisting, the whole head, like someone spun it backwards, still smiling. We laughed at him then, like all dumb teenagers do, but we remembered it. You don't forget a story like that, especially when Jacob disappeared a week later. No one found him. No sign of a struggle. Tent was zipped up tight. Only thing missing was a coil of black rope he kept for hanging his hammock. By August, folks didn't talk much about camping alone. The locals made excuses, said it was coyotes or heat stroke, or the border junkies moving up north. But I remembered what Jacob said. And when I went back to that ledge, just past the falls, just where the river bent behind the hidden pool, I swear to God, I saw him too. Not at first. The air went still before he showed up. Still like the forest. Was holding its breath. No birds, no bugs, just the wind tickling dry leaves like paper. Then I heard it. The squeak of a rope under tension, slow and low, like a swing swaying back and forth with no wind. Then he stepped out from behind a rock that hadn't been there a second ago. He looked wrong, like a kid from a different time. Shirt full of holes, shorts faded to almost white. No shoes, skin gray like clay left too long in the sun. And the rope, oh God, that rope, it was black as sin, thick and frayed, looped over his shoulder like a promise. "You want to play?" he asked, and it was like hearing a voice from inside your own skull. My mouth dried up like old leather. I couldn't answer. Couldn't move. He stepped closer. "You can go first," he said, offering me the rope. It looked slick with river water and smelled like something pulled out of the mud. And then he smiled. That's when I saw it. His head. Twisted full around like he'd turned to look behind him and forgot how to come back. Eyes bloated and pale, lips purple, neck stretched just a bit too long. He ran, didn't care about the trail, didn't care about the sharp rocks or branches scratching my arms. I just ran till I hit my truck, peeled out of the parking lot, and didn't stop till I hit Johnson City. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe the sun baked my brain, or maybe I was just finally cracking under all the things I hadn't said about Mom leaving. But the next morning, there was a rope in the bed of my truck. Coiled neat, damp, black. I burned it. Didn't work. Next day, it was in my room. I moved houses, left town for a while, still found it hanging from the showerhead in a cheap motel near Uvalde. Always the same, always damp, always black, and then the dreams started. I see him every night now. Doesn't matter where I sleep. He's hanging in the corner of the room, swinging slow, back and forth, never blinks. Sometimes he hums, a tune like a lullaby, slow and off-key. My little cousin said she heard the same song last week on the school bus, humming from the back seat, but when she turned, the seat was empty. Just a frayed rope laying there. I tried warning people, but no one listens long. You tell folks there's a ghost with a rope and they look at you like you're telling a ghost story. That's the trouble with truth. It sounds too much. Like fiction when it's real ugly. A park ranger told me 5 kids went missing in the past decade, all last seen near the falls. 3 left behind coiled ropes. 1 carved a message in the limestone near the pool before disappearing. No, 1 talks about what it said, but I saw a photo of it once. He asked me to swing. They don't say his name because no one knows it, but I think names don't matter to ghosts like him. They remember what they were, not who. Now I don't go near trees. I don't sleep in the dark. I leave music on, loud enough to drown out the creaking. But sometimes, just sometimes, I still hear it squeak, squeak, squeak. And once, just once, I found a noose hanging from the rafters in my attic. Never been up there. Rope was soaked. Black. Smelled like the river. And I swear, when I looked up, I heard him again. You can go first. So if you ever find yourself walking out near Pedernales Falls, and you see a boy holding a rope with a crooked smile and head turned backwards, don't answer him. Don't look him in the eyes. Don't even think about taking the rope, because he's patient. And if you listen long enough, the river will whisper your name too. There's no sign for it, no fence, no warning. The state doesn't acknowledge it, and the park maps are spotless. If you ask a ranger about it, they'll pretend they don't know what you're talking about, even if their eyes say otherwise. But it's there, right between Trail 6B and the dried-out riverbed. Nobody hikes anymore, not since the rains stopped and the cottonmouths took it for themselves. A collapsed tunnel mouth, crusted with ivy and limestone and thyme, half swallowed by the greedy. Mouth of Texas earth, and it breathes. I first heard about it from old Arlen, who used to run the bait shop outside the park gate. I was maybe 14 then, still stupid enough to think legends were bedtime stories and that grown-ups told lies to scare kids off booze and bad company. Arlen smelled like wet pennies and cherry skull, but he talked real slow, like every word. Cost him a dime. You ever hear the whistle? He asked, fingernails yellow and thick, eyes milky but twitching. The one that don't got no train behind it? I laughed. Said I'd been to Government Canyon plenty of times. There weren't no tracks. There used to be, he said. Back when men thought they could tame God with steam and iron. They laid the rail straight through limestone hills. Blasted a tunnel where there weren't one. It didn't last long. Folks said the stone spit it out. Whole section collapsed inside a year. Buried 3 workers. State closed it. Buried it. Pretended it never happened. Then he leaned closer, like something might be listening. But it's still there. The tunnel. You just gotta listen for it. And, like an idiot kid with more pride than sense, I went looking. It took me 5 Saturdays and the better part of 2 summers. Most of the brush behind Trail 6B was too thick to walk. You had to crawl in places, scratching up your shins, swatting, fire ants and thorns like devils dancing across your ankles. But on the 5th Saturday, just before dusk, I found it. A wall of rock curved inward like a yawn, and, at the center, an opening, wide enough to drive a mule cart through, hidden under deadfall and a half-dozen rattlesnake nests. The temperature dropped the moment I stepped close, from 95 to maybe 60 in a breath, the kind of cold that don't feel natural in the middle of Texas heat. The air smelled old, like railroad grease and mothballs and damp velvet. I didn't bring a flashlight, stupid, but I had a lighter, flicked it once, flame barely catching against the tunnel's wind. The light showed rusted tracks half buried in gravel, old wooden ties rotting like molars in a jaw too long ignored. The inside curved, not just left to right, but down, like a throat. I didn't mean to go in, not at first, but the air was pulling at me. It weren't wind, it was like breath, in reverse. I stepped inside. My first memory afterward was sunlight. My head spun like I'd taken a hit to the skull. My shirt clung to my ribs like it didn't fit. My knees were sore, and my shoes, hell, my shoes were a child's size. I was kneeling in red dirt near the main parking lot. People were staring. A woman screamed. I ran to the restroom near the visitor center and locked myself in, looked in the mirror and nearly puked. I was 10, again, maybe 9. My cheeks were plump. My chin had no stubble. The scar on my eyebrow from a BB gun accident? Gone. In its place, fresh pink skin, baby new, but it wasn't just my age. It was my eyes. Something inside them had shifted, like a weight. Something, slow and patient, was watching from inside my skull, not the other way around. I tried going home. They didn't know me. My mother slammed the door in my face, thought I was some runaway. I screamed until a neighbor called the cops. They found no ID, no record. I didn't exist. They named me David Doe, put me in a foster home near Bandera. I didn't talk much after that, not until I turned 23 again. See, that's the thing no one tells you. It's not just time you lose. It loops. And every time you go through, the tunnel takes a little more. I tried explaining it to a therapist once. She nodded and jotted things down until I asked her why she hadn't aged a day in 5 years. Then she blinked like she'd only just noticed her reflection. You hear whispers when you sleep, not out, loud, inside. And sometimes your reflection moves just a beat too slow, or too fast, and sometimes it grins when you ain't. I started keeping tabs on other returns, kids with old eyes, men who walked different after hiking alone. A park ranger named Lisa went missing in 2008. They found her boots near Trail 6B, neatly placed. The next spring, a 12-year-old girl was picked up on FM 471. She had Lisa's dog tags in her pocket, and she wouldn't stop scratching her wrists, saying, "It's wearing me. I can feel it wearing me." She hanged herself in the juvenile ward 3 months later. There's something inside that tunnel, something old, ancient even. Not a ghost, not a demon, something hungry. It don't eat flesh or blood. It eats time, memory, self. And it don't just want yours. It wants to wear you. I've spent years researching, but the tunnel shifts. Location. Not far, maybe 100 yards this way or that, but always just beyond where you're supposed to be. And when the wind blows just right, you hear the whistle. A low, mournful sound like a train with no destination, dragging its weight across tracks no one laid. I still dream about it. That breath, the pull, and I still don't know if I ever really came out. Some nights I see my old self, watching from behind glass, banging to get out. And some mornings I wake up and swear my hands are older than they should be. Wrinkled, cracked, or worse, someone else's. I try not to go near Government Canyon anymore, but the thing is, sometimes when I pass a mirror, I see the tunnel, and it's smiling. They say if you find it, you'll come out younger. But don't forget, something else will be walking out wearing you." It starts with the sound. That's the truth of it. Always has been. Not the sight, not some shadow flickering behind a cedar trunk, and not a scream or growl like you hear in horror movies. Just a sound. Click, clack, like hooves on gravel. Slow, purposeful, and wrong. It was the summer of 2016 when Sam Hollis first heard it. He was a junior at UNT, home for the weekend, and he needed space from his family. Too many arguments over nothing. Too many sighs about his major. Too many quiet looks about his dead brother that none of them could quite erase. So he grabbed his backpack, a Gatorade, and went for a solo hike out at the Dallas Nature Preserve. Thought the fresh air would help. He was half a mile in when he first heard the sound. Click, clack. It echoed off the trees in a way footsteps shouldn't, sharp like metal on bone, like something heavy and deliberate dragging a rhythm through the trail dust. He paused, listened. Wind rustled through mesquite and scrub oak. A squirrel darted across the path and vanished into brush. But the sound didn't stop. Click, clack, click, clack. Sam turned around expecting to see someone behind him, maybe another hiker with sticks or some park ranger making rounds. No one was there. He stood still for a moment, frowning. He wasn't scared, not yet. Uneasy, maybe, like the moment, before a test result or when headlights follow too close on an empty highway. He kept walking. The trail looped around an old creek bed, dry as bone. No birds, no bugs, just the wind, and then click, clack, closer this time, like it had gained a few feet. He spun around again, nothing, just trees, tall grass, and the silence of a place too used to being ignored. His heartbeat started to rise. He tried to laugh it off, told himself it was probably a raccoon or a deer. Hell, maybe a prank. Urban legends were thick in North Texas, and everyone grew up hearing about the goat man, half beast, cloven hooves, horns, and the eyes of a devil. Lured kids into the woods with stories and sounds and never let them go. Campfire stuff, teen gossip, internet creepypasta. Sam didn't believe in monsters until the smell hit him, like meat left too long in a broken freezer, like roadkill baked in the sun and left to weep in the weeds. He gagged, pulled his shirt up over his nose. Then he heard breathing. Not close, but not far either. Heavy, deep. A kind of wet inhale, followed by a rumble that sounded more like a growl than an exhale. And the footsteps. Click, clack, click, clack. Still steady, still slow, but louder now. Behind him, unchanging. Sam ran. He bolted down the trail, his breath tearing at his chest, heart pounding in time with his boots on the dirt. No path markers, no cell service, trees blurred past like ghosts. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move, had to run, but the sound kept up, never faster, never panicked. Click, clack, click, clack, like death itself had no need to hurry. He stumbled over a root, hit the ground hard, skinned his palms, looked up. That's when he saw it, just for a second. Through the haze of dust and sweat, there was something between the trees. Tall, bent forward, muscled like a man but shaped like something nature never meant to walk upright. Its legs were wrong, backward bent, ending in hooves that shined like polished onyx. Its torso was lean and stretched, its skin mottled like dried blood, and its head a goat's skull, big, cracked. The horns curled wide, black and heavy, and its eyes, if they were eyes at all, glowed red, dull like coals about to die. It didn't move, didn't lunge, just watched. Sam scrambled backward, shaking, his mouth dry and his bladder threatening to betray him. It smiled. Not with a mouth, because it didn't have one. With its head. With its presence. That's the only way he could describe it. Then he blinked, and it was gone. No sound now. No breathing. No footsteps. Sam ran till his lungs burned, till his legs trembled. He burst from the trail into the clearing near the parking lot, soaked in sweat, eyes wild, but no one else saw anything. He didn't go back. Not ever, but others did. Some said they heard it. Some never came home. A girl from Garland went missing in October. A hiker from Fort Worth vanished 2 weeks later. Rangers shrugged it off. Coyotes, accidents, heat stroke. But the regulars, the old men who walk the trails with dogs that don't bark and eyes that don't blink, they know. They warn the newbies, not with words, but with a look. A quiet shake of the head, an extra step around the bend. They know that sound. Click, clack. See, the goat man don't run. He don't need to. He waits. He watches. He follows. And when you hear those steps behind you, steady and slow, it ain't 'cause he's lost. It's 'cause you are. The thing about Brazos Bend, what folks from Houston or Sugar Land don't know when they drive out for a weekend of birdwatching or hiking, is that it keeps secrets like a drowning man holds his last breath. Down there, where the water runs slow and black and thick with stories, the air feels old, like it remembers everything that's ever happened under that canopy of hanging moss and cypress limbs. Come early, they say, before the heat turns the bugs suicidal. Come before the frogs go quiet. Come before the fog lifts. That fog, thick as cotton and slow to burn off, rolls in heavy most mornings. It doesn't just sit on the swamp, it breathes, creeps in through your car vents, stains your clothes, muffles your footsteps, and sometimes it watches you. That's what happened to Clara Finch. She was a teacher, retired, 64 years old and stubborn as a boot in a flood, loved her morning walks, said the trails at Brazos Bend, kept her sane after her husband died. She came every Wednesday and Saturday, rain or shine, had a pair of beat-up binoculars she wore like a necklace and a thermos of coffee that smelled like motor oil. Folks around called her Miss Finch, which she thought was funny. Like the bird, she'd say. The last time anyone saw her was a Wednesday. She'd parked in the lot near Elm Lake just before 6 a.m., left a note on the dash like always. Gone walking, back by 9. But she never came back. The ranger who found her car said the windows were rolled down a bit, even though it had rained. Her thermos was on the hood, still warm, and the inside smelled like burnt toast and something else, like pond water left too long in the sun. They found one of her shoes near the Big Creek Trail, wedged into the mud like she'd stepped out of it mid-stride. A little farther down, her binoculars, unbroken, lenses clear. Then nothing, no body, no blood, just drag marks in the trail that led toward the fog. And the fog, it was still there, thick, heavy, watching. The sheriff's deputy, a kid from Angleton, fresh out of training, said he saw lights in the fog that morning. Not flashlights, not car beams. Eyes, big yellow ones, floating maybe 5-6 feet off the ground. Blinking slow, too slow. And he swore, right hand on the Bible, that they narrowed when he looked back at them, like they were squinting. No one believed him. Not really. But no one laughed either. Gators don't have eyes like that, and they don't blink. Or laugh. But someone heard laughter. An old fisherman, Earl Batson, said he was out near 40-Acre Lake when he heard a sound he couldn't explain. A low chuckle like something trying to mimic a man but not quite getting the rhythm right. It came rolling out of the fog, skipping across the water like it had weight. Said it made the birds go silent. The gators slip underwater. Even the wind stopped. You ever hear a laugh with no mouth behind it? Earl said. That ain't a thing you forget. After Miss Finch disappeared, folks stayed away for a while. Then they trickled back. They always do. People forget. Parks reopen, but things didn't go back to normal. Dogs wouldn't walk near the water. Little kids cried for no reason, pointing into the mist, saying, "That man's staring at me." And a jogger, one of those lycra-clad city folks with a smartwatch and a podcast playing, stopped mid-run and screamed until he vomited. He said he saw a woman standing knee-deep in the fog, mouth open like she was screaming, but no sound came out. Just those yellow eyes glowing in her throat. They say the fog near the bayou moves different now, like it's looking for someone. They say sometimes it peels back just enough to show a face. Not quite human, not quite not. A face that changes when you blink. A face that remembers. A maintenance worker quit after he heard his name whispered from the reeds. Not spoken. Whistled. Like someone squeezing the name out of wet lungs. They tried cameras, thermal, night vision, all of it. But none of it worked. Batteries died. Footage corrupted. One ranger went missing for 4 hours, only to be found walking in circles around the nature center, mumbling, "It knows I saw it. It knows I saw it." Now, there's a new sign at the entrance to Brazos Bend State Park. Trails closed in morning fog. It's not official. The park rangers deny putting it up. But no one takes it down. If you ask them, the locals will. Just shrug. Say the same thing. It ain't the gators you gotta worry about. It's the fog. Because sometimes it breathes. Sometimes it remembers. And sometimes it looks back. They always said Colorado Bend had its own sort of quiet. Not the peaceful postcard kind you find in the Rockies or those postcard trails where families take selfies with waterfalls. No, this quiet had teeth. It got under your skin, pressed, against the inside of your ears until it felt like your own breath was too loud. Locals never camped too deep past the trailhead, not because of bears or snakes, though those were there too, but because of the stories. The kind that hung around like gnats you couldn't swat. The kind old-timers whispered when they thought nobody else was listening. Willa and Mark didn't care about stories. They were on their 3rd anniversary trip, loaded up with trail mix, collapsible mugs, and a lightweight tent they got on sale from REI. 2 teachers out of Fort Worth, looking for a break from the walls of screaming kids and buzzing fluorescent lights. They parked just after sunset, figuring they could hike in a half-mile before full dark. A little night under the stars, no cell service, no distractions. The trail was still warm, the dirt soft from the afternoon sun. Mark led, swiping his flashlight in wide, slow arcs. Willa followed close behind, humming something tuneless and lazy. They passed a crooked sign with the arrow barely hanging on by one rusted bolt. Lemon Ridge Overlook scratched into its wood. Willa stopped. Smell that? Mark lifted his nose, frowned. Sulfur? And rosemary. Like the kind you throw in a stew pot, he grinned. Maybe it's a haunted casserole. But Willa didn't laugh. The smell was getting stronger, sticky and sweet, like rotten eggs smeared with perfume. It clung to her throat. She coughed and waved it off. Then she saw it. Not walking, just tilting. Between 2 cedar trees, maybe 30 feet off the trail. A figure. Tall. Human-shaped. But it didn't move like people do. It swayed, one side to the other. A slow, creeping tilt, like someone trying to remember how to use legs they hadn't worn in decades. And its mouth. God. That mouth, smiling, wide and wrong. Too many teeth, too much gums, as if the flesh had been stretched back and nailed there. It didn't blink, didn't breathe, it just tilted, smile growing. Mark turned around and froze. Willa. What? Don't. Grin, she said without looking at him. Don't grin back. What the hell are you? And then he laughed. nervous at first, then louder, a bubbling giggle like a pot boiling over. Willa turned. His mouth was opening too wide. The smile didn't reach his eyes, because his eyes weren't his anymore. They were full of it, the grinner. Willa backed away, stumbling over roots. She tried not to look, but it was hard. So hard. Because something about the grin pulled, like gravity, like drowning. She closed her eyes, ran blind. Branches slapped her face, thorny vines tore at her legs. She could still hear Mark, giggling, talking nonsense, saying her name in a sing-song voice like a child playing hide-and-seek. She slept in a drainage ditch that night, dreamless. When the sun came up, the forest looked different, brighter, cleaner, as if the grinner had never been real. But she knew. She felt it. When they found her walking barefoot near the park entrance, her hair full of leaves and her legs streaked with blood, she couldn't explain what happened. Not really. Mark was never found. Neither was their tent, but the ranger who took her statement, a weathered man with pale eyes and a wedding ring, sunk deep into his finger like it was trying to escape, looked at her real careful when she said grin, and then he said real low, "You looked too long." It comes on moonless nights mostly, from between the trees, smelling of sulfur and rosemary. A figure that doesn't walk, just tilts and smiles. If you see it, look away. If you grin back, you'll never stop, not ever. Your face locks, your mind melts, and something else lives inside your head, smiling, forever. They don't mark the trail on the map anymore. Used to be a narrow branch off the lighthouse trail, just past that big rock that looks like a skull if the sun hits it right. A ranger named Dolores tagged it Path B7 back in the 70s. A shortcut through Palo Duro Canyon's deeper wash, said it shaved an hour off the loop if the rain hadn't flooded it, but folks don't call it B7 no more. Around here, it's known as the trail that eats time. Now, I know what you're thinking. Old cowboys talking nonsense after too many cores. Some metaphor for how beautiful the canyon is, how easy it is to lose track of time among the red walls and cottonwoods. But this ain't poetry. This is something wrong. Something that, don't care if you believe in it or not, I seen it myself. It was June '93, first real scorcher of the season. A boy from Lubbock, maybe 22, clean-shaven and dumb as hell, came in asking about solo trails. Said he wanted to. Find himself, like Palo Duro was a damn therapy session. Dolores was still managing the visitor center back then. She tried to point him toward a couple safe routes, but he kept asking about B7. Swore he'd read about it on some old hiker's forum. She said it was closed. He laughed. They always laugh. He left with 2 water bottles and a little orange pack. Signed the trail log at 11:08 a.m. He came back at 6:41 p.m. Looked like he'd aged 40 years. Hair gone white as bone, skin like crepe paper, eyes that didn't seem to blink right. We thought he was sick. Heat stroke maybe, dehydration. But when we tried to ask him what happened, he started babbling. Not in Spanish or German or Navajo. Not in anything I've ever heard. Sounded like glass grinding against wood, with a rhythm that made your stomach twist. Even he looked terrified of the words coming out of his own mouth. They flew him to Amarillo in a med chopper. He bit a nurse on the way. Never stopped crying. I heard they transferred him to a federal psych facility in Oregon. Said it was safer that way. I don't think he knew who he was anymore. Dolores burned the trail logs the next morning. She never told me why, but I think she was afraid someone might follow his steps, like names on that page could echo, and it wasn't the first time. There were others. A woman came out in 1981 after a 2-hour walk and screamed at the sky for 20 straight minutes. Her lips bled. She told a ranger she'd seen her husband and kids. Only her husband died in '76 and the kids were never born. She said they begged her not to leave. That time was softer in there. She said the canyon offered her years, but she refused the trade. Then she walked into a mesquite tree until her skull cracked open, and then there was Clarence Dodd, 61, former oil field worker. Had a stroke just outside the trailhead. Only his CAT scan showed brain damage consistent with years of neural degradation. Alzheimer's like where? Only he hadn't been gone long enough to burn a sandwich. Clarence couldn't remember his wife, but he could recite full sermons in Aramaic. I remember because I was the one who found his pack. Still had a bag of trail mix inside, still fresh, but the inside of the backpack was filled with dust, like someone had buried it in the canyon. 100 years ago, people stopped asking about B7 after that, but now and then, someone still disappears. Doesn't matter if they're new to town or just real persistent. Someone always finds that old post, half buried behind prickly pear, with a piece of rusted wire hanging off it. That's all that's left of the sign. The trail looks like any other. Red dirt, scrubby switchbacks, walls that close in like the canyon's got secrets. And at first, it's beautiful. Sunlight cuts the rocks into gold. Wind hums like a lullaby. Then you notice your watch has stopped, or your phone dies, even though it was fully charged, or the sky turns a little too pink, like sunset arrived 20 minutes early. Then the quiet hits. Not peaceful quiet, but wrong quiet. Like sound's been muffled, like time itself's holding its breath, and the trail starts to shift. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it moves. Curves that weren't there before. Landmarks you passed twice. Shadows stretch in the wrong direction. Your footprints behind you start to vanish, swallowed by the earth like it's forgetting you ever existed. By then, most folks panic. Some run. A few keep walking, thinking they'll find their way out. That's the worst thing you can do. Because the trail wants you to keep walking, wants to wear down the pieces of you until the years don't fit no more. It ain't a place. It's a hunger. I think that path's been there longer than the canyon. Longer than the Permian Sea that carved this land. I think it's a wound in time itself. One that don't scab over. One that lures folks who've got something broken inside them. People running from regret, from age, from grief. People who want to forget or remember too hard. And once it's got you, it starts feeding. Not on your body, no. On your hours. You leave the trail lighter than you came in. Because time ain't gone. It's been eaten, and sometimes, if the canyon don't finish its meal, you come back. Gray-haired, weepin'. Speak words you never learned, and never quite feel the same again. There are woods you walk through, and there are woods you go into. Sam Houston. National Forest was the second kind. The kind you don't hike through. Not really. Not unless something's wrong with you, or something calls you in. People said. It was peaceful there, a good weekend escape for city folk from Houston or Conroe, but peace ain't always quiet. Sometimes it's silence too deep to be real, a kind of hush where even the birds hold their breath. And sometimes it's the dead wood talking. Charlie Riggins wasn't from around there. He was from Wichita Falls, where the wind never stopped, and the trees never learned how to grow tall without leaning. He came to Sam Houston in the fall chasing something vague. Healing, maybe. His therapist said he should get away from things. Take a solo trip. Reset. Funny how doctors always made it sound so clean, like pressing a button would make the nightmares stop. Charlie's reset was a two-man tent, a bottle of whiskey hidden under freeze-dried beans, and an old scar across his left palm that ached when the wind shifted. He didn't talk about that scar, or what he did to earn it. He hiked deep, past the multi-use trails, past the hunting boundary signs, way off where the trees stood older than the Civil War, twisted like they'd grown out of bad dreams. Some were burned halfway up. Blackened trunks with green crowns like fire had touched them and got bored halfway through. But most of them were dead. Not rotting, just standing there, dry, pale bark, like corpses still dressed in Sunday clothes. He made camp near a hollowed oak that looked like a jawbone. Something about it felt safe, familiar, like he'd seen it in a dream. He didn't question it. That night he built a fire, warmed up a pouch of stew, and didn't drink. That was important. He'd promised himself, no whiskey on night one. Just quiet, just think. So he stared into the fire and listened, and that's when the trees began to talk, not like you'd expect. Not whispers like movie ghosts. Not sudden, clear words. No. First, it was just creaking. Natural, maybe. The kind of groaning wood makes when it sways a little in wind. Except there wasn't any wind, just stillness. Then the moaning started. A low, guttural yawning sound rising from the trunks like the trees were sighing in pain. He stood, flashlight sweeping the trunks. Nothing moved, no animals, no owls, just him and the dead. He heard it again, louder this time. Charlie. His name, clear as glass, pulled out of the bark like a splinter. He turned, fast, shouted, "Who's out there?" Only silence answered. Until a second voice spoke, "We remember what you did." He dropped the flashlight, trembling now, trying to breathe slow. "Who's there? That's not funny." But the voices didn't laugh. "You were 12, said one voice, thin, high like a child's. "You watched," said another, low and gravelly. "You let it happen." "No," Charlie whispered. "No, no, no." He turned to run, but the path was gone. The trail he'd marked was swallowed up in roots and leaf mold. And the trees, the dead ones, they were closer now. A wall, of them, bark splitting open, not like wood should, like skin. Voices leaked out of them. "You buried the knife under the chicken coop." "You told your mama it was an accident." "You laughed when the dog screamed." The trees were remembering, but not his memories. Things no one else knew. Things he'd swallowed down so deep he figured even God had turned his face. He stumbled back into camp, fire dying. He reached for the whiskey, unscrewed it with shaking hands. "Won't help," a voice said from behind his ear. Wet, breathing. He turned, nothing there. But now the fire had changed, burned blue, and inside it, shapes, faces. One of them was his father, hat still on, eyes rolled white. The fire whispered, "Confess." "No," Charlie croaked. The wind came then, sudden and hard, and the trees screamed, a shrill splitting wail that wasn't wind at all. It was grief. It was judgment. "Confess." Charlie fell to his knees. "I didn't mean to. He was hurting Mom. I just... The trees leaned in, one cracked down the middle, splitting open. A tongue of sap licked the ground. Another tree groaned, words spilling out like blood. "You liked it?" "No," Charlie sobbed. "Please, say it." "No." The fire went out. The darkness swallowed everything. The forest fell still. When they found Charlie's campsite 2 weeks later, it was mostly untouched. His bag was there, his tent was zipped, the food unopened, but his boots were gone. And so, was he? Only the tree behind his camp was different. The dead oak with the hollow trunk had a new crack down the middle. Deep inside, if you pressed your ear just right, you could hear something, a man's voice, repeating the same 4 words. "I didn't mean to." The rangers chalked it up to a disappearance, got some college kids to pack up the gear. One of them, a girl named Letitia, said she heard something weird on the walk back to the parking lot, something like creaking, crying, a voice saying her name. She never went back to the woods. Most folks don't, because those trees, they remember. They listen when you lie, and if you walk too deep, if you stay too long, the dead wood whispers, and it whispers you. The wind never really dies out on the caprock. It whispers through the canyons like an old man muttering prayers he don't believe in anymore. The red rock glows like blood when the sun dips low, casting long, mean shadows across the rim. That's where it lives. Not in the cliffs, but in the spaces between. They call it the Watcher. A shadow that doesn't move. A shape that stands just so. Long limbs, wide shoulders, no face to speak of, just presence. Like something God made when he was tired. Something he set down and forgot to take back. The first reports were easy to ignore. A woman from Lubbock on a hiking trip claimed she felt followed the whole way up Haynes Ridge Trail. She turned back early, told the ranger she saw a figure up on the rocks just watching. Didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, outlined against the setting sun like a scarecrow someone forgot to plant. The ranger smiled, told her she was just spooked by a burned juniper stump. She never came back. Thing is, a stump doesn't follow you to your car. 2 weeks later, a man named Jed Larrabee, retired, ex-military, quiet type, drove out to Caprock Canyons alone for a weekend hike. His wife said he needed the space, said he'd been seeing things at night, talking in his sleep about someone standing in their hallway. She chalked it up to the whiskey. They found Jed's rental car parked near the Fern Cave trailhead, still running, his gear packed neatly in the trunk. But the ridge was empty, all but for the Watcher. The search teams didn't see it at first. Took 3 days for someone to mention a shadow that seemed wrong. One that didn't shift with the sun, didn't sway with the wind. Just stood still, as if waiting, as if watching. The men didn't talk about it much. They just looked over their shoulders more, kept their flashlights on longer. Some refused to go back up the ridge after dark. Then came the suicides. That's what they wrote in the papers. A teen couple from Amarillo drove off the cliff one night. No brake marks, just silence, and then the fall. The girl's brother claimed they'd been acting weird. Said his sister would stare out the window for hours, mumbling about someone in the corner of her eye. Said her boyfriend started sleeping with a flashlight under his chin. Said they went hiking the weekend before, at Caprock. He said they came back wrong. No one wanted to call it what it was, but the locals knew. The Watcher don't haunt houses. It ain't a ghost. It ain't a monster, not in the way you think. It don't need to chase you, don't need to scream or show its teeth. It just is. A shadow that watches. That knows you saw it. And the moment your eyes meet its outline on the ridge, that's it. You're marked. It starts small, a feeling in your spine when you're brushing your teeth, like someone standing in the hallway just beyond the light. You check. Nothing there. Of course not. Then later, the dreams start. Not loud, just still. You standing at the edge of a canyon you've never seen before, wind blowing your shirt back, and behind you, breath you can feel, but not here. One man swore he caught it in a photo. Snapped a panorama at sunrise near the parking lot, trying to catch the golden glow off the canyon rim. Looked fine in the camera, but when he printed it, there it was. A long, dark shape near the edge. No face, no arms, just height and stillness. The man mailed the photo to the ranger station, then hung himself in his garage. They said he left a note that just said, "It won't stop looking." A woman once drove all the way from Oklahoma, claiming she had to get back to the ridge. Her family said she'd never been to Texas before, never hiked, but she swore she remembered the trail, knew it exactly. When they followed her there, she got out of the car at the overlook, walked straight to the edge, and smiled. They barely caught her in time. She didn't scream or cry, just whispered, "I'm tired of being watched." When they looked back at the car window, they saw it. A shape in the reflection, standing behind the group. Not moving, not waving, just waiting. Some say it's an echo of something ancient, a spirit of the land, a punishment. Others say it's something else entirely. a hole in the world shaped like a man that sees everything and does nothing but stare until your soul comes loose from your bones. It never leaves Caprock, but once you've seen it, it follows. Not with footsteps, but with attention. You'll feel it behind you while you do the dishes, while you watch TV, when you're alone in the shower and that cold spot kisses the back of your neck, when your reflection pauses a second too long before moving. It doesn't chase. It doesn't talk. But it waits, and waits, and waits. Sometimes, when the sun sets just right and the wind dies completely, for just a few minutes, you can look out at the Caprock rim and see it again. Still there, still watching. And you'll know. It never left. It just gave you a head start. They say the wildflowers in Austin bloom a little too bright on the Lady Bird Johnson Trail, especially in spring, especially just after sunset. And the blue bonnets, well, they're the brightest of all. Some years they glow like something lit 'em from below. Old-timers won't walk that stretch past 6 o'clock. Not because of coyotes or heat stroke or snakes in the brush. No, it's because of her, the woman in the blue bonnets. Not that Eddie Collier believed any of that. Eddie was 29, worked at a custom bike shop in South Congress, and fancied himself a modern rationalist, the type that mocked ghost tours and rolled his eyes at haunted Airbnb reviews. So when his friend Amanda told him not to jog that trail at sunset, because of her, Eddie, the one in the dress, he just laughed. "I'll wave at her for you," he said, lacing up his sneakers. That evening, just after the sun dipped past the hills, Eddie ran the loop. The air smelled like dust and sage. It was quiet, not dead quiet, but oddly still. Not even frogs chirped. That's when he saw her. She was standing in the middle of the trail, just past the mile 3 marker, where the path narrows near the creek bend. Pale dress, no shoes, skin the color of old paper, and her hair, long, brown, drifting in the breeze even when the air wasn't moving. She smiled. Eddie slowed. Something about her grin made him dizzy, like he'd stood too fast or held his breath too long. Her arms swayed like wind chimes in a soft draft. Then she spun. One twirl, slow and dreamlike, and danced right into the bluebonnets. He was still moving forward when he realized it, like his legs weren't listening to his brain anymore. She beckoned him, fingers curled in a gentle pull. Her mouth never moved, but in his head he heard her. "Come dance." The field rippled as she stepped through it, not like grass under feet, more like water around ankles. That's when Eddie noticed. Something was wrong with the flowers. They weren't swaying in the breeze. They were leaning toward her, like little blue mouths trying to whisper or kiss or feed. The earth there didn't look right either. It was too soft, dark, like overturned soil at a gravesite. And when she danced again, her feet didn't touch the ground. They sank in a little. The wildflowers parted for her. Eddie blinked hard, shook his head. But his foot hit something. Not a rock, not a root. It was soft, spongy, and when he looked down, he saw a sneaker, half buried, still laced, and beside it, fingers, not attached to anything, just reaching. Frozen. Pale. Eddie screamed and turned, but the path was gone. Behind him, all he saw were more flowers, miles of them. The trail had vanished like it had never been there. She was closer now. Her arms still swayed. That same smile still stuck to her face. Not joyful. Not kind. Just wrong. Like a mask someone had drawn on too tight. "Come dance," she said again, and this time her mouth did move. It cracked open in a grin too wide for her face. Teeth like pearls dipped in soot. Eddie ran, or thought he did, but the ground wouldn't let him. His feet sunk an inch, then 2. The bluebonnets twined around his ankles like vines. Something below pulled. It wasn't fast, no jump scare, no sudden yanks, just a steady, hungry draw. Like the earth had been waiting for him. He fell, reached for something, anything, but all there were flowers, blue bonnets, and every one of them bloomed wider the deeper he sank. He got one arm free, crawled, screamed. His fingers brushed the trail again. Gravel, safety, home, but the blue bonnets hissed, a soft, whispery sound like 100 voices saying mine all at once. Then she was over him. Her face was upside down, peering into his, inches from his nose. And up close, her eyes weren't eyes. Just dark hollows, full of dirt. She kissed his forehead, and everything went black. By morning, the trail looked normal again. Joggers passed by, sipping from bright plastic bottles, earbuds in. One of them stopped to admire the field just past the mile 3 marker. "Damn," he muttered, pulling out his phone for a picture. "These blue bonnets are insane this year." And just behind him, buried under the blossoms, a single hand stuck, out of the earth, fingers curled, reaching toward the sun. The woman danced in the distance, smiling, waiting. There's a reason the Franklin Mountains feel heavier at dusk. You ever been out there, out past the last convenience store in El Paso, where the air gets thin and the trails start to fold over on themselves like a crumpled map? You'll notice it then. The stillness. That's not quiet, not really. It's something holding its breath. I used to think it was just altitude messing with my head. You know, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring and your thoughts run louder. But there's something else out there. Hikers know. The old ones do anyway. The ones who don't talk much. The ones who stop going out alone. He's why. They call him the old hiker who ain't got no face. That's what the locals whisper, usually around a campfire with the flames low and the whiskey running out. They'll start with a laugh, maybe, a joke about ghost stories, but it fades when someone mentions him. They all know. You see him from a distance first. Always a distance. Midday, maybe, or just before sundown, when the sky turns copper and the shadows stretch like they're trying to escape. He don't look like much at first. Flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, big, dusty backpack, wide brim hat that hides his face real good. You think it's just some old timer out there taken in the desert like folks do when they need time to forget. But he walks funny, not limping, not slow, just wrong. Like the ground don't touch him quite right. Like the rocks and the slope and the dust don't register. You won't notice at first that he's walking backwards. It's subtle. He drifts, you blink, and he's a few feet farther, away than he should be, shoulders still turned, head low. If you try to catch up, if curiosity gets the better of you, like it always does with the dumb and the damned, you'll see him turn. That's when the fun ends, because there ain't. Nothing there, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just skin, stretched smooth over the front of his skull like someone ironed wax across his bones. No wrinkles, no expression, just blank. But the part that gets you, the part you don't shake, is that he still moves. That. Head tilts like he's looking at you, even though there's nothing to look with, and you feel it. That seeing, like your soul just got read like a menu and found wanton. He don't talk, he don't run, he just keeps walking. Backwards, always backwards, and if you follow, God help you. Because you will. It's like a hook sets in your chest. Not pain, just need. You tell yourself, it's fine. Just a weird guy, probably blind, probably injured, maybe needs help. But you follow, and the trail stretches and stretches, and things stop making sense. The sun don't move right. The rocks underfoot repeat. Same bend in the path, same pile of bird bones, same lizard twitching in the dust. Time goes soft, like bread soaked in old milk. You follow, and it gets harder to remember why. There are stories, old ones, about folks who went after him and never came back. Their cars still in the lot, cold and locked. Their campsite tidy, like they meant to be back by sundown. One ranger, can't recall his name now, think it was Warren or Walters, found a camera once. Not digital, old Polaroid, on the edge of the East Ridge where folks don't go much. Every photo was the same. That old hiker, flannel shirt, big pack, wide brim hat, and in every single one, he was closer. Not facing the lens. Never that, just closer. There's a memorial now. Not official, just a cairn. A stack of stones and a dry wash where a boy disappeared in 2009. His sister left it. Says she saw her brother walking away, following a man in a big hat. She called out. He didn't turn, didn't wave, just kept going, like he'd always belonged to the mountain more than he ever did the world. They never found him. And sometimes, just before night closes in, hikers swear they see two figures now, one with no face and one who used to. They say, if you see him, the best thing to do is close your eyes. Don't look, don't move. Let the dust settle and the moment pass. Because if you follow, even once, you never stop. They say the scream started in '94, right after the flood. The big one that ripped up half of Bell County like a kid tearing through wrapping paper. Chalk Ridge Falls took the worst of it. Roads gone, trees down, and at the bottom of the falls, a trailer that used to sit up near Nolan Creek was found in pieces. Twisted metal and baby things scattered all over the limestone. Diaper bag caught in a branch. Plastic pacifier melted to a rock like a sick joke. No one ever found the woman or the baby, but the scream stayed. Locals say it's a bobcat, but folks who've heard it, really heard it, don't say that twice. It ain't no animal noise. It's too long, too wet. Like a woman screaming through blood in her throat. Like she's been doing it so long she forgot how to stop. They call her the Screamer. And if you hear her once, you'll hear her again. My buddy Andy thought it was all crap. Said we were just spooking ourselves with ghost stories to feel tough. So he dared us, me, Sean, and Cal to camp overnight near the trail. Right near the falls, by that slick rock ledge where the water fans out like glass. We went, stupid as hell, with a bottle of Jim Beam and 3 flashlights. It was hot, even at night, and the bugs were out like they had a vendetta. At first, everything felt normal. Just the water whispering and the trees creaking in the dark. We were laughing, passing the bottle around, telling stories about girls and getting out of this dusty town. I remember saying something dumb about the scream, trying to get a rise out of Andy. Then it came. We all froze. Dead still. The scream came from the rocks, right above the falls. Long and low at first, then sharper, rising like steam from, a kettle. But it wasn't no kettle. Wasn't no cat either. It had words in it, buried deep under the howl. Words like help and mine. Andy stood up, looking pale. It's just wind, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. The wind don't crawl. Something crawled down the face of the rocks. It was slow at first, but then it moved like it had too many joints, too many arms, or not enough. Pale, soaked, skin that caught the moonlight like wax. Long hair hanging in ropes, dragging behind her like seaweed. And her face, God help me, that face. It didn't have an expression. It was twisted, like it had melted halfway into a scream that never stopped. Her mouth hung open so wide I thought her jaw had snapped. Maybe it had. Maybe it didn't matter. Anymore. She pulled herself forward, elbows grinding against stone, wet slaps of bone on rock. We backed up, but the light from our flashlights kept catching her eyes. They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared, wide and blind and looking through us. She whispered something, and it felt like a gust of cold air slipped into my lungs. I dropped the light. When I picked it up, she was closer. Too close. Have you seen my baby? Andy turned and ran. That was the last we saw him. No joke, no punchline. He was gone. We found his boots 3 days later, sitting upright at the edge of the falls like he'd taken 'em off to go swimming, except we all knew he didn't. That water's just a few feet deep, and deep ain't what she wants. She don't want to drown you. She wants to take something from you. Something alive, something small. Over the years, people started leaving. Things up by the trailhead. Dolls, rattles, baby clothes, like tributes. Like maybe it'd keep her from taking theirs. A ranger once said he saw her in the middle of the day. Said the sun hit the rocks just right, and there she was, perched up high, knees to her chest, hair dripping even though it hadn't rained in weeks. She opened her mouth and the scream came out again, even though her throat didn't move. He quit the next week. No reason given. I go back sometimes, just to see if she's still there. I bring something with me. A toy, a lullaby box, even a damn pacifier once. I leave it at the edge of the rocks, just out of reach. She never touches it while I'm there, but when I come back, it's always gone. I don't know if she ever had a baby, or if the flood took more than just lives that summer. But I know one thing. She's still looking. So if you ever find yourself walking through Chalk Ridge Falls after dark and you hear a scream echo down the water like it's dragging pain behind it, don't stop, don't turn around, and if a woman crawling on all fours with her jaw swinging loose asks if you've seen her baby, don't say a damn word, because if you do, she'll take what you love most, even if it's not yours. They say it started showing up in the late 60s, right around the time a man named Curtis DeLong vanished off Trail 9 in Huntsville State Park. Back then, the park was still growing wild, only half cleared, the kind of place where pine needles could bury a body whole by morning. The old-timers whispered it wasn't a bear or a drifter that got him. No, sir. Curtis was a good man, they'd say. But good don't matter when the forest finds you. The first time anyone saw the red door, it was fall. Leaves gold and crisp, air starting to smell like smoke and old stories. A pair of teenage girls stumbled on it while skipping church. They'd followed the pine trail east, way off map, to a clearing that shouldn't have been there. Right in the center stood the door. Alone. No walls, no frame. Just a rectangle of chipped red paint with rusted hardware screwed into nothing but air. They said it looked tired. That's the word they used. Like the wood had seen too much. And one of them, Janie Brooks, swore it was breathing. Real, slow, like it had lungs in the grain, exhaling sap and secrets. No one believed them until Janie stopped talking. She'd started whispering to herself at night, said she could feel someone pushing from the inside, said she woke up once with bruises on her sternum, 3 perfect ovals like someone had been knocking to get out. Her daddy took her to Houston for treatment, but she never made it there. She slipped out of the moving car on I-45, barefoot and smiling. They never found her again, but a hiker found her hair ribbon tied around the knob of the red door 3 days later. That door ain't nailed down. It don't sit in one spot. It moves, slow as molasses, but steady as rot. You'll be on a trail you've hiked 100 times, and suddenly, you see it, standing between trees too thick for wind to pass through. Always with that same lean, that same heavy breath. Most folks know better now. Park staff pretend it's nothing. Say it's an art installation, that it must have been some local sculptor, trying to be clever. But the rangers, the real ones, the ones who've been there more than a season, they won't look you in the eye when you mention it. Some carry salt packets in their breast pockets. Others quit after their first solo patrol, past dusk. See, if you find the door, that means it was looking for you. And if you knock 3 times, just 3, not more, not less, it knocks back, but not with sound, with feeling. It starts like a pressure in your ribs, a deep thump you think is your heart, but it ain't. It's the echo of the knock, coming from inside. It's like something behind that door matched your rhythm, found your beat, found your hollow, found a way in. There's a story I don't like telling much. Happened to my cousin, Ray. Worked as a trail maintenance guy for the park, spent most days clearing brush and replacing worn-out signs. Ray didn't believe in spooks. He was a beer and football kind of man. Laughed when I told him about Janie Brooks. Called it backwoods hogwash. Until one morning, he came back pale, with pine sap streaked all down his arms. Wouldn't say nothing for hours. That night, he knocked on my door at 3 a.m. Said he'd found it. Just a door, he whispered. But it knew my name. Said he didn't knock. Said he almost did. But what stopped him wasn't fear. It was the sound it made. Said he heard a baby crying behind the wood. Not loud, just soft. Real soft. Like something new had been born on the other side. Something waiting. Something hungry. Ray disappeared 2 weeks later. His boots were found neatly placed on the trailhead bench, laces tied, socks folded inside. I went looking once. I wish I hadn't. It was sunset, the kind where the sky looks bruised and the light turns the trees into shadows of themselves. I walked the south trail, real slow. I wasn't expecting to see it, and I didn't. Not at first. I heard it. 3 knocks. Not loud. Heavy, they came not from ahead of me but from inside. Deep, like a memory or a buried sin. My chest clenched. I swear to God it felt like my ribs were the door and something was trying to push them open. I dropped to my knees. Couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. Then it passed. Like wind. Cold, crawling wind that moved along the inside of my skin. And when I looked up, it was standing 10 feet ahead. The red door, no frame, no hinges, just standing there between the pines like it belonged. I didn't knock, I didn't even breathe. I backed away slow, turned, and ran. I pissed myself halfway back to the car. I ain't ashamed to say it. Sometimes I still feel that pressure in my chest. At night, just before sleep, 3 beats, like a knuckle, like a reminder. They say the red door's got no lock, no key, no handle on the inside. Because it don't open from here, it opens from there. So if you're ever walking Huntsville's pine trails and the wind dies and the birds go silent, and you see something crimson between the trees that don't belong, turn around. Don't. Knock, don't breathe. Because what's behind it ain't trying to hurt you, it's trying to be you.